one of the things that drives me certainly is not coming from any money, right? Like, I never want to be poor again. And I think that forces me into working like a psycho, right? Just like working constantly.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Founder Hour. Today we have with us Nik Ingersöll of Barnana. Nik is the co-founder and CMO of Barnana, and we're very excited to have you here, Nik, and have this awesome conversation with you today.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I guess to kick it off, let's sort of start off, your background story and how you kind of ended up starting Barnana.
Yeah, so my background, I grew up in a really rural part of western Nebraska. It's a place where the closest city is like 4 hours away. It's not like, I grew up in a small town of 100,000 people outside of Chicago. It was like this really remote kind of area, across from a field of sheep. So my jobs growing up were like baling hay and branding cattle and shaving sheep. Literally shaving sheep and, selling the wool and that kind of thing. So, grew up out there. We didn't have a ton of money, right? My dad, he was a trash man for a while, a garbage man. Then he was disabled on the job. And so, we sort of relied on his disability check. And so it wasn't the most flourishing upbringing that you could ask for. And so, I at a very young age wanted to concoct a plan to kind of escape, get out of there somehow. And so the way that I saw that was, get really good grades, learn a bunch of skills, and then hopefully those will parlay into me, amassing some sort of exodus when I'm 18 and able to get into college. So that's what I ended up doing. I left immediately after graduating high school, went to California. I saved up a bunch of money from all the jobs that I was working through the 4 years. My parents didn't have, a college fund, or there was there's literally no backup plan for me. So I was like, well, I'm going to go out there, and if I fail, then it's not going to be a good situation, right? But in the same breath, it's like I didn't have a ton to lose either, because if you start with nothing, there's nothing, you don't really have anything to lose either. So in a way, it's a bit freeing in retrospect. So I went to college in California. I started in Sacramento. Immediately knew that I had to somehow pay for college, books, rent, like all the stuff. And I'd only saved up $1,000. Because back in 2006, when I graduated high school, minimum wage in Nebraska was $5 an hour.
Wow,
it's crazy. Yeah. In California, it was already like $8.75 or $9, something like that. So I was trying to find jobs. In college, I worked like every single random odd job you could imagine, right? So like dealing blackjack at private parties, to catering bar mitzvahs, to like selling cable door to door, like all this crazy shit, just to pay for rent and books and take out loans and all that good stuff. So I started doing that. I would work on sort of my entrepreneurial endeavors at nighttime. So I'd go and dig a ditch during the daytime, go to school. I was going to school full time, and then at nighttime I'd try and hustle and make something happen. And so it was several years of doing that, right? I eventually founded a company called Candy Lab, which is a tech company. It was kind of parlayed. I started doing a lot of fine art painting and trying to sell those on eBay and in galleries, and that is a super tough business to be in. Like,
this is in college.
Yeah, in college. And even in high school I was doing it too. And so I thought, when I first went to college, I was like, you know what? I bet I live in California now. There's a better market there. Like, I can sell my paintings easier. There's more galleries. There's more shows. And like, no. I mean, your return on time is just dismal unless you are just next level killing it. And that could take, forever to really get that notoriety in the art world. So, did that, and then what I realized is that people, instead of wanting, pretty paintings to put up in their office or at their house, they'd prefer to have logos and branding and packaging, and that's where the money was at. So I started doing that freelance, which ended up parlaying into founding the company Candy Lab, which we started off as an interactive agency, kind of a boutique, dev design agency. Raised some capital there. We decided to launch an augmented reality platform that I wrote a patent for in 2012. I was still an undergrad. And then I started working on Barnana as a side project with now my two business partners, Coway and Matt. Did that for about a year and a half until we kind of just said, fuck it, let's just try and launch this thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I guess the rest is history from there.
So Nick, I mean, that's obviously a great kind of summary on how you've kind of got to this point now. But I really kind of want to break it down a little bit and talk about, you mentioned that you had a little bit of adversity growing up. You could have seen better days, and now hopefully, you've gotten to that point. How do you think that affected your growth as a person and then eventually as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think difficulty is something that, I think difficulty is important for a lot of reasons, right? Struggle is important. Sometimes it happens just serendipitously, right? Like your life is a tougher upbringing than other people's lives, and that's something you can't control.
Right.
But then when you're in a comfortable spot, or maybe you were born in a comfortable spot, I think that you should introduce struggle to sort of, reinforce. I look at it kind of as a vaccine for diseases that you may get in the future, right? Like when you induce struggle purposefully in your life, it's like you're giving yourself a vaccination for struggle that you'll experience in the future organically that you can't avoid, right? And so you can take the controlled struggle now to sort of, taper off any future struggle. And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. I think that, one of the things that drives me certainly is not coming from any money, right? Like, I never want to be poor again. And I think that forces me into working like a psycho, right? Just like working constantly, because it's real. Like, when my dad was, I want to say, 42, like, before he passed away, he had to take a job at like a mini mart, just like cashier style shit. And it was just kind of sad. Like, we just didn't, he still didn't have money, and I was still in college trying to struggle. And like, so the year we really started, taking Barnana to market. And, for me, I think that struggle is super important. And growing up, I think that's just something that's just kind of been built into me from the jump. Yeah.
Something I always think about is exposure, just the concept of exposure. And when someone is like growing up and they're exposed to something that's kind of all they know, unless they somehow put themselves in different situations, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously there are people that have grown up in let's say in a wealthy family or an affluent family or something, and they've been exposed to a lot more. Where, like, an example would be get a great education, go to a great college, go to the Ivy Leagues or something like that, and then some aren't exposed to as much. So how would you say growing up, like, you found kind of that drive to, like you said, graduate high school, get the heck out, come to LA or California, go to school, and eventually start your own company?
Yeah, man, I really like that. I really like that question because I think it frames sort of the diversity of experience that people have growing up, right? Like, I wasn't even urban adjacent. Like, I couldn't even see a skyscraper to know what that was, right? Like, it's one thing to grow up sort of in a place where you can kind of see success happening, or that there's startups or whatever, or private schools. Like, I had no concept of any of this stuff. And so I'm the first person that ever graduated college from my family, right? My dad was a super smart guy, just didn't go to college. He had to work. I think he had me when he was 22. Similar story with my mother. And, I think my exposure was super limited. And I think without the internet, I'd probably be stuck there still. A lot of people get stuck there. It's a very isolated spot, and now it's a little bit different because the internet's so pervasive with mobile phones, et cetera. But back then it was just, you couldn't really see the light. I didn't know what the difference was between an Ivy League school, a state school, and, UCLA or UC Berkeley or whatever.
Yeah.
No clue, right? Like, oh, it's college, right? I knew the difference between like college and like a junior college, but that's pretty much all I knew, and there was no guidance for me in that way. And so, I just got straight A's and killed the ACTs and just hope for the best was kind of the strategy.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really know much else.
And what did you study in college?
Business, yeah.
Business. So, what was kind of your motive for getting a business degree? Like, did you feel like you were going to go and work somewhere, try to get the best job you could and make a consistent income, a safe kind of, secure job?
Yeah, so for me that was always kind of a for sure backup plan. Like I said, I think the worst scenario in my mind is I'm just left out to dry, without the ability to make a decent living, and then I'm poor again. And that was sort of like the stopgap measure, the plug in the sink that doesn't let the water run past a certain point. That's kind of the way that I saw the degree. I've always been very entrepreneurial, right? So like I was the kid in 6th grade, gum was disallowed in school. So what I would do is I'd go buy a ton of gum and put it in like this little thing in my locker, and had different prices for each gum, and this and that. And then depending on which one was the most popular, like I might raise the price if there's some scarcity going on.
Supply demand.
Supply and demand,
Very
right?
simple.
Super simple. And going back to selling paintings in high school and things, and so it was always my goal to do that. I, for better or for worse, I'm sort of like anti-authority in a lot of ways. Like I am somewhat of a nonconformist. Like I could never be in a fraternity, for instance. Like that's just not happening to me. Yeah, it's just not a thing that happens. Yeah. So I think a lot of it was kind of that. Maybe I was probably rebelling against a lot of things. So yeah, I think the business degree was definitely sort of a stopgap. But I also think that going to college exposes you to like-minded people that also want to do interesting things. It also provides you with opportunities to network and be exposed to things. You're talking about exposure earlier that I would just never get exposed to otherwise. I think it's very difficult. You have a lot of talk about, should people go to college or should they not go to college and start a business? I don't think either one is right. For me, I had to go to college in order to be exposed to the people and to everything else, the ecosystem and the environment, to do that, right? To start a business, and maybe that's not true for everybody. But I do think it's a little bit dangerous. Right now the sexy thing is like, don't go to college, it's a waste. And look, I'm the first one to say, when I see the amount of money I'm paying for like this East Asian studies class that I had to take my junior year, it's like, what? It's crazy. But I think that
see the ROI of like, am I using it?
Dude, none. There's zero ROI.
Hey, you never know. I mean, Barnana expands to East Asia, and then you're gonna be saying, "Thank God for that East Asian class that I took," because now I know it. You probably don't remember half the things.
Well, I know about Siddhartha and all that. The Bhagavad Gita, etc.
Exactly. So Nick, you're now in this new environment. You have this entrepreneurial kind of drive. You have the passion. You know that you're going to be doing something. You don't really know what. And I totally agree with you that school and, college is this place that, sure, you're getting this education and, you're going to class, but more so you are exposed and you meet some awesome people, like-minded people that could, and on the other end of the scale, people that completely disagree with you and have a different view of business or life or whatever. But that also kind of helps you out in determining what you want to do. So tell us a little bit about, how you met one of your co-founders or, both of your co-founders, and how you guys kind of began this whole process while you were in college.
Yeah, so with Barnana, I actually, it's funny, these two questions kind of tie in really well together. So I was in college, and there was an American Marketing Association mixer, and so I would, my whole goal was like, I'm gonna, I didn't have any time to spend, right? Because it was like, work a full-time job, go to school full-time, and then work on side projects, at nighttime.
When I don't have time, yeah.
Yeah, and so I had no social life, short story. But in doing so, I'd go to like the American Marketing Association Mixer, and that's how I met my business partner, Cowway, right? Matt and I both went to SDSU together, so we met that way, and it was that, right? It was being in a certain place at a certain time with a curated amount of people. And that's essentially how we initially met, yeah. So at the time, I started running Candy Lab. Cowway was running a bicycle manufacturing company. Matt was working as a VP of finance for another startup in La Jolla. And so I worked on Barnana as a side project again for a year and a half while I started a couple of e-com businesses that were doing okay, like, $10,000, $20,000 top line revenue businesses, like very, maybe a 35% profit margins, like not great businesses, but something, right. To help. I was like working at Subway making sandwiches during the daytime, and at nighttime I'm like selling whatever I could do, off of AliExpress, on a random website on Shopify. And so we did that for a while, and then about a year and a half later, we said, let's do this. I was kind of frustrated with the way things were going at Candy Lab. There was a couple of notable happenings that really forced my hand in leaving, and then I think that the three of us, the timing all just worked out really well, and we all jumped off the cliff.
Talk to us about Candy Lab. I know you mentioned that there was some VR that went along with that. Was that something you even knew about, or it was just you were interested in it and you began and then kind of figured it out?
Yeah, so we were really early on with AR, like
AR, excuse me.
Yeah, which. Oh yeah, the future of AR and VR, I think will merge, and then everyone will just call it VR because it's easier to pronounced than augmented reality. It's like a very long, weird word.
Right.
But, you know, for people who don't know, AR, augmented reality, is where you're essentially placing, you're superimposing digital items onto a real world experience. So, you know, put your phone up and there's a floating, you know, star in the sky, but you're looking at the actual sky, something
Which
like that.
Snapchat has been doing now a little bit with some of those things. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is, you know, 2010, 11? Like, way premature. No one, even still, people don't know what that is. Just tell you, say Pokemon Go, and be like, oh, I know what that is. And so we started off as sort of the boutique interactive agency. So I would do a lot of design and development work for mostly web, some, you know, mobile apps and things like that. And then that's sort of, we sort of kind of, you know, one of these late night, you know, working on projects sort of scenarios where we said, well, why can't we make some sort of like, you know, Mario Kart meets, you know, Pac-Man, real world, scavenger hunt kind of thing, and that's essentially how it got born. Yeah. So we raised a little bit of money and did that for a while. And Candy Lab's still going on. They've essentially pivoted now to being sort of a white label AR platform for businesses to create a Pokemon Go-like experience. So that's what they're up to now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this concept of timing, right? Like in that example of like, you know, you being a little bit too early to the market. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how does one kind of figure out if it's the right time to start a business or start, you know, create a product or service?
Well, dude, I'll tell you this: if I only knew that all I had to do was put a goddamn Pikachu on the app to make it a success, dude. You know.
The only missing piece.
Timing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's somewhat serendipitous. It's somewhat you know, analyzing the market and blah blah blah, doing your SWOT analysis, etc. But it's a conglomeration of all those things. I think, you know, a lot of people will use timing. I think a lot of people that probably listen to this podcast will be thinking, you know, they're thinking of a business or wanting to do a business. Oh, I don't know. What should I do? Should I wait? Should I do it now? Is the time right? Is the economy going to crash? Who's going to get elected? And really, it's like, just fucking do it, because you're not really going to know if the timing is right until the timing was right. And then you're looking back like, oh, shit, the timing was right. Now I'm late.
Right.
And that's kind of how that story plays out.
Right.
You know, so the short answer is you can look at as many indicators as you possibly can and try and make the best informed decision possible. But at the end of the day, you know, sometimes you're, you know, a year early to a trend that blows up, and there you are.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because, you know, we always say, you know, hindsight's 20/20, and in this case, you know, it's actually true, because how do I know that I was right? Whether the concept was right, whether the time was right, whether I was the right person to do it, right? I don't know that until I actually do it, and it either succeeds or it fails. And at that point, you know, if it's succeeding, then, you know, you kind of figure out the next steps. And if it's failing, you know, either you kind of change up your game plan a little bit, or you just say, you know what, it didn't work out. But then again, you know, now we move on to the next thing, which is kind of what you did here with, you know, Barnana and, you know, with leaving Candy Lab. So discuss with us a little bit about that experience of leaving something that you had already, you know, started, you know, how that felt as, you know, a founder at that point, but then how it kind of felt transitioning into a new venture. Yeah,
it was a little strange. So there's even one step before Candy Lab, which I was running essentially a brick and mortar, you know, call it supplement store. Right. And you know, I had to leave my business partners there to do Candy Lab, and then leave my business partners there to do Barnana. And I think it's just not being romantic about what you're doing and the ideas that you have, you know, and being really real with yourself, right? Like, look in the mirror and be like, is this shit working out? Like, does it have long-term viability? Are my partners in this? Like, really in this? Are they mentally stable enough to be in this? Right? Like, am I going to be happy? What's the light at the end of the tunnel? What's our goal here? I think sometimes people get scared to ask those questions sometimes, right? Yeah. And for me, that was kind of what I've been doing for a long time, right? It's just like, you just have to do it, even if it's painful or it makes you feel sad or mad or unsure or worried or whatever. You know, it's tough, right? Like, the short answer is fucking difficult, dude. Like, you're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with their emotional baggage. You're dealing with their, you know, logic. That's great logic, bullshit logic, combination of all of them in between, right? You're just like running into circular reference arguments about this and that. For me, it was very clear when I needed to leave. It was the right decision to do it at the time. You know, it's a process. I think a lot of people are just scared to do things in general, and especially big things like that, and especially kind of offend people or kind of make them sad or angry or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're not living your own life, how can you help anybody live theirs, right? And so if you're too worried about what everybody else is thinking, doing, feeling, you won't do anything, and by consequence, your life and their lives are going to be worse.
Yeah, this is something, a concept that I've read, like Tim Ferriss writes about it a lot, is kind of knowing the rules of the game and knowing kind of what the end game is, and if it doesn't look like appealing to you, you might want to think of something different and do something else that you feel like much more passionate about or whatever. So, okay, so in this case, Candy Lab, that was kind of the situation for you. What did you see in the banana market? Like, what did you see with Barnana, and like what kind of got you to
saw a lot of potassium, I'll tell you that.
That's true.
What kind of caused you to take the leap into, kind of leap of faith into this business?
So, oftentimes people ask me like, "Hey, what do you do?" I usually tell them that I slang bananas for cash because it's it's just so ridiculous. Everyone's like, "Oh, come on! Like, what do you really do?" So I sling bananas for a living is what I do. How I came to do that. So Coway, my business partner, he grew up in Brazil. There's a lot of sort of banana-based products down there, right? So tons of dehydrated bananas. A lot of them are, partially dehydrated. They're super sticky. They're pretty ugly. They're wrapped up in cellophane and sold on street carts. But they taste delicious. They look weird. And so I tried these things. I'm like, this is kind of crazy.
And you tried this in Brazil?
I tried this in the U.S. Coway brought some from Brazil.
Got you.
Yeah, and the crazy part was, like, how is this product down here? There's so many different derivations of this product down there, and there are literally none in the United States. And this is the time where Vita Coco and Zico coconut water is coming to the U.S., right? So coconut water's been around in Brazil forever, and no one had just made it sexy and, put Rihanna, Jessica Alba as the spokesperson or whatever, right?
I'd buy it.
Right? Yeah, same.
Yeah.
And Mark Rampolla is one of our investors, the founder of Zico, and, we didn't know him back then, but we see Zico coming to the market and doing really well. We see Samazon taking acai from Brazil and doing really well. So we're like, why have bananas just not made the jump? Because acai is like this crazy thing where most people can't even pronounce
There's
it.
an educational aspect.
Huge,
Yeah.
and it's still not. And they've been around for.
Remember Monavi?
Yeah.
The multi-level kind of market.
What's it called? The triangle thing that they had.
Yeah.
The pyramid.
The pyramid marketing.
So that it's a huge educational aspect.
Yeah, huge educational aspect. We saw bananas, and everybody knew what bananas were. So bananas are the number one selling fruit in the U.S., more than apples and oranges combined. Americans eat tons and tons of bananas.
Right.
It was kind of a no-brainer. And so we saw, people like Zico branding a fruit, right? So they're a coconut water company. We saw Palm Wonderful coming into the market, and they're branding the pomegranate. Another random esoteric fruit. It's like, who's eating pomegranates? Yeah. On a regular basis in the morning. Like, you're not doing it because they're really hard to consume. So our general concept was we want to do for the banana what Palm Wonderful did for the pomegranate, and really brand the fruit and create a brand around bananas. Even when you look at apples, right? You have fresh apples, but then look at all the derivative products of apples. Apple sauce, apple juice, apple puree, apple cider,
Caramel
apple this, apple that.
Apple music.
Apple whatever, yeah. And apple computer. Oh, that's a different thing. You can't crunch on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and with bananas, there was nothing until we came along.
Right.
Yeah.
So how'd you come up with Barnana?
So we see the banana as nature's original energy bar. Okay. So it off the tree, it already comes in a package. Right, it's all packaged up. It's already in the shape of a bar. It already has a lot of the nutrients that you would look for in a bar, but the problem is the packaging is shitty and goes bad in like 4 days on your counter, and then
Changes
fruit
color.
flies show up, and then it's just chaos. Yeah. So that was kind of the idea. Yeah.
Nice.
Barnana. That's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I mean, that's we always talk about it with these founders, like the naming process of it, because it is difficult sometimes. You want it to make sense. Obviously this makes sense, but sometimes you're just like, I don't even know what they're selling. In this case, you kind of do. The packaging is right next to me. It's obviously beautiful, and our listeners will definitely see it once we put it out there.
That's something I want to talk about too. Is like the whole branding of this company, because it's like like branding bananas. It's just insane. Like, your website is beautiful. Your packaging, I was telling you before, is kind of looks like you're taking a website and putting it on a little bag. Like, what kind of went into that branding aspect?
Yeah, so I do all of our branding and design. It's something that we've never outsourced from the very beginning, and so design for me is something that I'm super passionate about and love doing, and so I've branded and designed a lot of different things, from Barnana to things that when I was doing freelance to things I was doing in my time with Candy Lab. So it's been from doing sort of fine art painting all the way through doing more logo design, packaging design, website design, that kind of thing. It's just something that I love to do. Yeah, I'm an artist at heart. I always have been since a young age. My parents, when we were kids, my brother and I, we weren't, we never had like a video game console, like the Xbox. We'd have to go to our friend's house or something, right? We just didn't have the money to afford one. So what my parents did is they would just hand us this giant box full of crayons and colored pencils and stuff like that, and just paper, and we just draw. And for whatever reason, as kids, we just loved to do it. So I think it just kind of stuck. Yeah, it's been an enduring personality trait, I guess.
So how does one come up with, whether it's bananas or something else? Like, what is your kind of approach to branding?
So it's obviously very multifaceted, right? I think you have to have something that aesthetically appeals to people in general first, right? Like sometimes, especially in the food space, you'll see this, right? So you'll have products and then you'll have brands, right? Like Zico is a brand, but then you'll have, I won't disparage any of these fine companies' names, but then you'll have some other coconut water X that's just like clearly a product, right? Like the package kind of looks like shit, and it's just kind of like, I guess this is safe. I'm not sure. Like it seems to be sealed. You ever run into one of those? And so I think that you have to kind of figure out what you're doing, right? Like you really have to have some sort of core within whatever you're doing. Otherwise, you're just going to be lost. And then you're going to run into, if you don't have this sort of core philosophy, this broader vision of what you want the brand to communicate and look like, you want to think about the feeling people are going to get when they look at anything about your brand. The feeling, like that non-quantitative, completely qualitative, subjective feeling someone just gets when they look at a product. That's the thing you have to start with.
How do you you use the word subjective, but how do you make something like, how do you make a feeling like that objective? Like, it's you said generally feel good, and I know where you're coming from, but how do you know that I'm gonna like this product, or how am I gonna like this brand, or like that a lot of people are gonna see this product on a shelf and say, oh, that's nice, like what's the measure for that?
Yeah, so this, I run into this question a lot, right? A lot of people, so it's interesting with art in general, whether it's art on a package or a website, or it's a painting in your house, it's a Picasso or a Dali or whatever, right? Some people may love it, some people may hate it, and you will always have both.
Of course,
you will always have one design up here that I've won plenty of awards for design, etc. There'll be someone that despises it for whatever reason. They just don't like the color orange or some shit. I don't know. So you're always going to have that. Oftentimes what you run into, especially when you're talking about design and branding, you'll run into people that are not creatives, that have never painted anything, made a logo, a package, anything in their lives, but they have an opinion on the packaging and what looks good, what doesn't look good. Well, I'm a consumer. I know what I like. My opinion matters too. And the problem is, if I'm trying to learn how to, fix a broken arm, I'm going to go to an orthopedic surgeon that knows how to fix arms. If I'm going to go learn how to, use QuickBooks, I'm going to ask an accountant because they know what they're doing. But with visual things, and I guess you could even include music in this to some extent, everybody kind of feels like they know what looks good, right? Like no one, when people get fashion too, right? Like when someone gets dressed in the morning, they don't put their clothes on, look in the mirror, like, God, I look like shit today. Let's go, But meanwhile, their belt doesn't match their shoes. Right. They're wearing bright orange with some stripes vertical, some horizontal. They just look like a mess. But they don't know that. And so it's creating something for the people that don't know those things, right? Like you do have to have sort of a design eye because a lot of people don't. and I think that when you're thinking about brands, you want to create something that's everlasting, right? Like there's a reason why you wear a Patagonia hat, right? There's a reason why you wear a Nike T-shirt instead of like a Crikey T-shirt, because like Crikey looks like shit and Nike is awesome because it's got the nice little simple swoosh, and they've really, there's a reason that people buy Apple products. And it's the software and it's this and that, right? But there's also sort of this prestige. There's an aura around the brand and the simplicity into which they design every teeny piece of the brand experience. And so when you're getting deep down into it, you kind of want every single touch point to match up, right? Like when you open an Apple product, it's like, oh, open this little thing. Everything is very well thought out. Tab, boom. They've curated that entire brand experience, and that's sort of the feeling that they're going after.
Absolutely.
So kind of let's talk about strategy. I think that's a great segue into kind of how you strategically take a concept like a banana, or like whether it's a software or something that's like your core, and build on top of it. Like you have different types of snacks. You have your like brittles, you have your bites, and you have more coming. How do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, so it's actually, right now I'm going through a bit of a redesign process. So I'm constantly iterating on our designs. And so you can actually, of course, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see this, but behind them there is a board with all of my musings of, of rebrand and things like that. There's also a product on there that I can't tell you what it is yet, but you'll find out in late January. And you'll see a bit of a branding update from us. It is difficult when you start with one product and then two, then four, and then a different product line, and then you have 3 product lines, and then 5. And how do you differentiate those products, yet still keep the brand consistent throughout? So when people see Barnana over here, they see Barnana over there, even if it's in a different part of the store. It's a big challenge. It really is. And I guess to put one caveat onto what I was saying earlier, it's yes, design it's a skill, right? It's a thing that's very hard to quantitatively measure. However, if you put something out and nobody buys it, it's a bad design.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've ever seen somebody who's like, yeah, man, I'm an artist. I just like live in Venice and like, just like wear shoes and stuff and like just hang out, and then I make a bunch of art, and then you walk in and you're like, dude, that is like literally a brown piece of paper. Like there's nothing on it. It's like, no, man, it's the feeling
we
inside.
call that garbaggio.
Yeah. It's le garbaggio.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's, so that's an important note too, right? Like if you do have sort of this broader vision and scope and idea and things, and it has not been validated by the market, then you've failed at what you're trying to achieve. And so that's a super important point, whether it's introducing new product lines or new products themselves or anything like that.
So would you say it's a matter of just testing? Like you kind of you really don't know. Like, I mean, I'm seeing there's a certain level of whether it's research or just kind of identifying trends and things that goes into it. And then there's a certain level of just like, you don't know until you know.
You don't know till you know for sure. I think testing is probably not the best for creative. And I know this is a very hotly contested issue, right? I think that a panel of experts is the best way to really get actionable, important feedback, right? Like if I'm talking about raising money, I want to talk to people that have raised money or who invest or whatever. Even though other people may have opinions about it, they may not have the most informed opinions that you need to make the best decision there. And if you left it open to the public, the general public also doesn't know that much about fundraising, and so their opinions are going to just be worthless.
Yeah.
Like they don't have the pool of knowledge they need to make an informed decision about what you're looking for. And I think the same thing applies for creative.
So more so, I was kind of referring to like the actual product, like you releasing different types of banana type products. How do you strategize that?
Yeah, so the innovation, so for us, it's we have a very large top of the funnel, right? Just like tons of ideas and innovation.
Exactly.
You have with any entrepreneur, you have sort of like shiny object syndrome going on to some extent. It's like, oh, dude, but what if we did this? What if we introduced banana? I don't know, refrigerators, and what if we took it beyond food, man? You're making all these crazy ideas. Yeah.
It's not a bad idea though, the banana fridge.
That's what I'm saying. A big old fridge. Think about it.
In a banana shape.
You
put bananas in there.
Exactly.
And
awesome.
Yeah, and we can discuss that later.
Yeah, I think so the problem is sort of taking all of those ideas and then dithering down which ones make the most sense. And when you're at scale, it's different, a little bit different when you're starting. I think you want to focus when you're starting, right? You really want to focus. I think a lot of people make mistakes when they want to launch a whole bunch of shit at one time, and you don't have either the personnel or the supply chain or the marketing team or the brand awareness or whatever that is to really execute on all those disparate products you're trying to launch at one time. Of course, unless you've raised $30 million and you've done it 10 times and you have a team of 100 people, it's a little bit of a different scenario. But generally speaking, most people that are trying to start really want to start with a lot of things instead of looking at it as, okay, what's my minimum viable product? Step 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, right? And think about it that way. So it's a little bit different in that context. I think you really need to focus. Now, when you're at scale, like we are now, and we're selling a lot of products, the innovation pipeline is a whole different thing, right? Because now you have real constraints on operations, on supply, on your sales team, right? On all these different things, your core competencies. As a brand and a company, for us to introduce something like a beverage, for instance, even though food and beverage are very close to each other, beverage is a different world.
Yeah. Right.
Supplements, different world. Right, you're gonna have to have different sets of skills within your employees to really execute on those things and execute on them well. Even though it happenstance, you would see, there's a bag of bananas and there's like a banana milk or whatever, right? Like, it's pretty much the same thing, but that is so vastly different. You really have to sort of think through that first, and then of course validate it by the market, right? Like what sort of products sort of fit the current trends, right? Like right now, you're probably not going to introduce like a high fructose corn syrup, 100% artificial flavor, 100% artificial color, like, blah, probably not the best. Yeah. But in like 1982 or whatever, it wasn't around back then, granted, so I'm a little bit speaking out of my ass, but I assume in the 80s, it's like, you could launch that, no one's going to think twice, because there really wasn't the awareness there. So that's kind of how I tend to look at it now.
Nick, earlier you brought up two of my favorite concepts, funding and supply chain. So, I wasn't kidding, but I want to talk about how, so you guys you try this banana, dehydrated banana from Brazil. You guys are sitting around, I assume, or standing around. I don't know what you guys are doing, but you guys finally squatting, even nicer. And so you decide to take this next step and start this company. What did you do right after that?
So, when we were sort of working on this for that year and a half time period before we actually launched the brand, I was doing a lot of design. We're trying to source bananas, right? And it's a very difficult thing. So we found farming partners in Latin America that we could get bananas from. What we ended up discovering, at the very beginning, we're like, okay, we'll get bananas from Brazil. But the problem is, Brazil makes tons of bananas, but they also eat all the bananas they make. So I'm like, that's probably not a fit. And so we're looking at, what percentage of organic bananas are exported from this country, that country, and the other one. And so we landed on a few that tend to make sense from an export perspective, right? Like the economy there, the domestic economy wasn't consuming all of the bananas, and so there's some bananas that we could get there potentially. So that was the idea initially, and then what we found out is that up to 20% of all the bananas that are produced go to waste before they ever even reach distribution or export. Interesting. And so, you go down there and it's like, okay, here's a pile of bananas that look normal to us because they're still green, right? Like, those will be good to eat in like 2 days or something like that. But they're either too big, they're too small, they have a bump or a bruise or a scratch or a something where they just can't sell them. They can't export them. In a place like Ecuador, where call it 80% of all organic bananas are exported, you just have a massive amount of bananas that are just being used as compost. And so we're like, well, that is insane because, as there's worldwide food shortage. And, when you look past the farm level, over half of all the food that's created goes to waste either through farming, distribution, or retail or consumer. And so that kind of got our minds turning, like, what's going on here? And from the very beginning, we wanted to start a food company that sustainability was first, right? We're a B corporation. The only products that we produce are organic, always. We just think that's the right thing to do, and that's growing up in sort of a farming region for me, it was really important. I know my other two business partners, it's important for them as well, and that kind of renewed our focus on supply chain and said, well, what if we could eliminate food waste at banana farms, organic banana farms in Latin America? Wouldn't that be awesome, right? So now you're essentially giving those farmers money that they otherwise wouldn't receive, and then also addressing sort of this whole food waste problem. And so that's kind of how we discovered it. Yeah.
Awesome. So you guys are finally now sourcing the bananas and starting the company. at what point do you start raising like outside capital from, whether it's, venture capitalists or other private investors, and how was that process like for you guys?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So for me, this is me in my early 20s, and, we're thinking about raising capital, and everyone's talking about friends and family. Like, oh, friends and family, raising the friends and family? Friends and family, friends and family. I'm like, what the fuck is friends and family? Like, my friends and family are poor as shit. Like, what? You mean that, wait, your friends and family have money to, like, give you to, like, maybe not succeed at, like, a business idea or something like that? It was sort of like a mind blower for me when I was young. I was just like, okay, friends and family, got it. Okay. It was one of those exposure things, right? I just wasn't exposed to that. Totally. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's a thing. So clearly I didn't have any of that. So what we ended up doing is we convinced this co-manufacturer in Northern California to produce a small, like 25-pound thing of chocolate-covered bananas. And we had bought some raw bananas from South America that were dehydrated. And we're like, okay, so the brand looks legit, right? Like we got the packaging down, the booth down. So let's just go to a show and see what happens. And so we went to the largest natural foods show in the world called Expo West in Anaheim.
Yeah, it's great. I was there this past year.
It's crazy, right? Now
it's insane. Yeah, it's nuts.
Dude, insane now.
It's bananas.
It's banana. Yeah, it's bananas.
It's bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. Love that song. Anyways.
Yeah, so we decided to go there and just see what happened. So, we have the booth. We look legit. Went to FedEx, printed off a bunch of labels, of this packaging, and stuck them on some Amazon pouches, and like put some product in there and put it in a glass case because we didn't have very many, so nobody could just take them. We had a little bit for sampling, and then we have retailers coming by and brokers and things, and Whole Foods came by, and Wegmans came by, which is a big retailer on the East Coast. And they both wanted to carry the product. They wanted to carry the product.
Wow!
Like, hey, can you deliver us some product in the fall? This is in March. And we're like, yeah,
So
obviously.
They came to you.
Well, yeah, they go by the booth, They try the
wow.
product and they really like it. And
you hear all these Whole Food stories, but that's amazing.
Yeah, and they want to bring it in. So we're like, well, I guess we got to figure that shit out real quick. And so to answer your question, it made it a lot easier for us to raise capital after that.
Right.
And so we raised a small round of capital at the very beginning with 100% warrant coverage to those investors to reinvest at the previous valuation to sort of reward them for taking
believing in you.
Yeah, taking really early risk. But when you have a PO pending from Whole Foods and Wegmans, it's a little bit easier to raise capital in that way. So that's how we did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you guys now start, and you guys have launched into several products. What was it like, growing the team, growing the number of products that you guys were carrying, and now at the stage you're at?
Yeah, so it's crazy, right? Like the scaling question. How do you scale? What do you scale?
Right.
For me, I was super lucky to have two co-founders with me, right? Like Coway, Matt, myself. The reason it's so important is that you're all in, like all in. And so you have, and we weren't paying ourselves or anything like that. I'm defaulting on student loans at this point, like not the best personal financial scenario of all time. But that sort of ardent belief in, we're just going to make this shit happen, kind of at least kept me going.
Yeah.
The good thing about having three co-founders is that you have work to spread out amongst the three of you, right? And I think it's also very important that they have different skill sets. Mm-hmm. Completely different skill sets, and we do completely different skill sets. Because if you don't, then you end up stepping on people's toes, and it gets a little messy. You're like, I want to do this. Well, I want to do this too, and you get in this whole back and forth terrible scenario that you often hear about. And so we were lucky in that way. It quickly became sort of necessary to bring on somebody in operations to handle supply, somebody to handle sales, right? And we started layering those things in. Some things you can hire internally for. Sometimes you can hire externally. We had a great broker on board very early on. So in the food space, one thing that's commonplace is you need a brokerage of some kind. And oftentimes at scale, you need several different brokers because they...
To deal with the distributors and whatnot?
Yeah, just different types of accounts, right? Like you have a broker for Costco, and then you have a broker for the natural channel, and then the grocery and then the convenience and all this stuff. So we have tons of brokers now that we work with. But one of the brokers very early on called Presence Sales and Marketing, they're one of the biggest ones in the natural foods industry. They made a cash investment in the business in our first round of capital. Because they believed in the product and everything, kind of like Whole Foods and Wegmans did. And I don't know, maybe we're just bullshitters, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
For them, turns out that they made the right choice, right? But at the time, it's a big risk. And so, layering on those brokerage teams were super important because they have the relationships, they know the stores, they can give you guidance, right? For a relatively low cost, you're not sort of committing to an employee where they're relying on you for their livelihood. But then operations is something that you can't outsource, right? You need somebody in charge of operations, logistics, that sort of thing. Marketing you can outsource to some extent with agencies and contractors. So I think it's, my general thesis on growing a brand from zilch is outsource things that you can while you can until you need to insource them, because insourcing things takes a long time, it's expensive, it's individual people that are relying on you and you only for their source of income, and it's much easier to be like, we're not going to work with this broker anymore because you know what, they have 50 other brands and they're going to be just fine. Yeah.
So going into 2018, I know you're still rolling out new products. Like, what does kind of the next 5 years look like for Barnana?
Well, you never know till you know. I guess I think you said that earlier. For us, we've built the business into an 8-figure business. We've raised several rounds of capital from a lot of awesome people. We have a great team internally. Our capital partners are also really good people. I couldn't emphasize that enough when you're going to raise capital. Like, make sure you realize that your idea and what you have and the execution of that idea is the gold, right? Like, the gold's not actually the gold. The gold is your idea, your enthusiasm about that, and your ability to execute on that idea. Money is just a commodity. It's everywhere, right? Like, it's not that hard to come by, really, if you're exposed to the right shit, right? So for us, it's ruthlessly focusing on building the brand, right? I mean, a lot of people in the food space, they think they're in the food space, they think they're in the beverage space, but really they're in the marketing and branding space. That's what they're actually in, right?
Especially these days with like social media and whatnot. It's like,
and it's
if
like
you're not
everything
on there,
under the sun has been done. So like, what is going to differentiate you is really your brand.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to talk about something. It's the Forbes list that you were on recently, 30 under 30. So talk to us about how that experience kind of, has helped you, I guess. I mean, I don't think it's hurt you in any way. But, first of all, how did you get picked to be, on 30 under 30 list? And, again, what were kind of the positive repercussions of, getting on that, inside that magazine?
Yeah, it was a really cool thing. I started off the year 2016 getting put on the list, which was cool. It's a weird thing. Like, for me, Forbes reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, we were considering putting you on last year's list. You were the one person we didn't put on the list. We want to put you on the list this year."
You were 31.
Yeah, I'm the 31st one, apparently, of 2015. Yeah, 31 under 31. 2015. And so I was like, well, that's cool. Didn't really know I was, in the running like that the year before. And then, so now you were going to put me on. That's awesome, right? I fill out all this stuff. So I filled out all of the stuff, questionnaire, like, how many rounds of capital have you raised? What are your sales? This and that, just business questions in general. And then a little bit about who you are and your story and that kind of thing. So for me, it all happened very, randomly. It was just popped up and boom, we were off the races and doing that thing. People reach out to me all the time now, "Hey man, can you put in a word and stuff?" I'm like, I don't think my word really counts into their evaluation criteria because I'm not a judge of the 30 under 30 anything. But secondly, I think it means more when something just kind of happens for the right reasons.
And organically.
Exactly. And, Randall Lane at Forbes, who runs, he's the editor and he runs the 30 under 30 program as well. They've done an incredible job in sort of building this community, right, of list members. And it didn't used to be like that. The first year that they did that was this last year. 2016, they did it bigger in 2017. They have a deal in Tel Aviv every year in Israel where they have a bunch of people come and hang out with other list members and whatnot. And then they have one in Boston every year and then a bunch of other smaller events. I've met some friends. I'll give the Schusterman Foundation a shout out here too because so the Schusterman Foundation is an organization that they run this reality program where they take people to Israel and show them lots of cool things and do a lot of cool team building and whatnot. So I was fortunate enough to be on the 30 under 30 list, and then the Schusterman Foundation picked a subsect of those people to take to Israel and give this really awesome curated experience. And through that, made some lifelong friends, right? Like people that I'll be friends with forever.
Yeah.
And so, that all essentially started with being on the list, right? And then the Schusterman Foundation sort of furthering the intimacy and growth within that small group between people. And so, for me, the benefits unquantifiable just because I've made so many awesome lifelong friends out of the deal. They're also doing really cool things, smart people, compassionate people, just, some of the salt of the earth type of folks that you hope to meet. So yeah, that's kind of how it worked out for me.
I'm sure like most entrepreneurs, you're a workaholic, and I'm sure you're working crazy hours. But what else kind of does Nik like to do outside of work? I see you have a motorcycle parked right here next to us inside your office, and I know you dabble with music a little bit. So yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I've been a musician my whole life, right? I grew up in the choir and doing show choir and chorus and men's glee and a cappella.
Were you bass or tenor?
Well, they wanted me always to be baritone or bass, but I often like to sing the tenor line because I thought they were more fun.
Okay.
There was a lot more, fluidity. Mm-hmm. They sang a lot more melodies than baritones or basses did. Right. So, occasionally I'd be in there and then I'd be singing the tenor part, and then she'd get all mad at me like, we need more people.
Yeah, those choir teachers are intense.
Oh yeah, Mrs. Simpson. Shout out to Mrs. Simpson wherever she's at these days. She was awesome. But so I did that. I still enjoy music. For me, it's kind of a meditation and a reset. When I haven't played music for a while, I write a lot of songs, more indie folk songs, acoustic songs now. I was in a death metal band. I was in a cappella. I've been in a lot of different sorts of, an EDM group for a while. I love producing music. Is very fun for me. It's more of a meditation for me than anything, I think. I like to go bow hunting. I did that a couple weekends ago with my brother for some deer. And other things.
Do you eat it after at least?
That's the whole point. Yeah.
Okay.
Oftentimes people look at people that do something as difficult as bow hunting, which for me, it's so the way that I do it. You hike 12 miles onto a mountain somewhere, and you spend 4 days trying to essentially survive that, and then hike every day to try and get an animal. And most of the time, you're just not successful. Most of the time, it's a backpacking trip with a bow in your hand. Yeah, most of the time. And a lot of people want to criticize that, yet they're going to go to In-N-Out and eat themselves a goddamn double-double. So hypocrisy, right? Enjoy that hamburger. So anyway, I like to do that. I like going backpacking is another sort of meditation thing for me. Like you said, I am a workaholic. I do a ton of work all the time. So I think it's important to kind of have a reset. And I think when you go out into something like the forest, into the wild, and you realize that none of your worries, there's no cap table out there, there's no P&L, there's not shit out there but just you and some bears and some trees, and and they don't care about you or your problems or anything at all whatsoever. Right. So I like to do that. I roll jiu-jitsu at the Gracie Academy with Hiron and Henner and Evandro and those guys. I think we were talking about this at the very beginning of the podcast, but introducing struggle purposefully to serve as sort of that vaccination for future struggle you can't control is something that I just couldn't emphasize enough, and that's whether it's bow hunting or backpacking or rolling jiu-jitsu or kickboxing. Those are things that are hard. Like the worst thing that you can have happen to you, one of the worst things you could ever have is have another grown man on top of you and you can't get up no matter what. And they're not even hitting you. Yeah. You can't move. Yeah. It's, you get Evandro Nunez, Hiron Gracie, Henner Gracie on top of you. You're helpless, right? You're helpless. And I roll jiu-jitsu, and I'm still...
You'd rather have a bear on top of you at that point.
Yeah, might as well. Hiron and those guys are a little nicer than bears, luckily. But, who knows, Yeah, so I like to try and do shit that's difficult or test myself mentally, mental toughness, physical toughness, that kind of thing. It's something I think probably a little too much about, right? But most of my activities sort of revolve around that, I would say. Yeah.
Love it.
Well, Nik, it's been a great conversation. I love your energy and a lot of interesting insight here into running a early to mid stage business. Whether it's branding, fundraising, or just staying sane. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. If you're trying to find Barnana anywhere, you can find us in a number of retailers. We're in about 15,000 retailers now. So Starbucks, Whole Foods, most of your natural and organic retailers, Barnana.com, of course, Amazon, etc. If you ever want to hit me up for whatever reason, you have a question or you want to send me hate mail or anything like that, you can hit me up at IngersöllNIK.com or hit me up on Instagram at IngersöllNIK. Or you could just send these guys all the hate mail too.
Send it our way, and we'll forward it in.
Yeah, much love. Seriously, I super appreciate you guys. Thank you.